Welcome, everyone. Brandy?
Thank you so much. And I just really want to express my gratitude to see the familiar faces and folks who are both local to me, Janet and Ned, but people I haven't seen in a long time, but have known and had that connection with for a long time. And I'm really acknowledge the elders of these circles as well that are consistent and I think keep our spirits buoyed to stay in the conversation in such hopeful ways. And so my name is Brandy Gallagher again, and I want to really bring us into this by embodied justice is something I put in the title. And I invite us to close our eyes for just 1 second as we move into the spirit of justice, and invite this way of knowing that isn't necessarily listening from our heads, but is listening from a place of other ways of knowing and how our beings know land and place and know all these ecosystems of our world. And I'm myself right now coming in from the traditional territories of the Hokuminum speaking peoples, the Cowichan, the Malahat, Sook nations, but I live and work and play on the territories of people who thought about agriculture, food systems, living regeneratively long before we had all these fancy words like permaculture and ecovillages, and just really acknowledge those of us in the circle that hold, but all those who came before us who know and knew the lands and place and these conversations, who had these knowledges and these wisdoms that we're kind of bringing forward through and into this conversation today. And in that, just noticing our body and how it knows, why it's embodied, how we are embodied, and this realization that my blood runs with the iron from the land. My bones, the very structure that holds me, is created by the calcium of the earth, and the oxygen and the air that flows into my being is all in exchange with this ecosystem. And how much of I heard a story of the DNA of an eagle, and how much the DNA in an eagle matches the DNA in a human body, and all these things we don't know necessarily with our brilliant smarty pants minds, but we might know with the rest of our beings, when we just settle into that embodied place of knowing. We are part of an ecosystem that is so unknowable, yet at the same time, the spirit and understanding of our own souls knows all of this already. So I'm gonna just come in with this conversation to bring you an example of what I think we all know through our prayers, and the spirit of agriculture and the spirit of all these learnings we've all been on in our lifetime. So I invite you to gently come back and come into the space just with that feeling of deep connection. Oh, lost my PowerPoint again. And that feeling of landing in place, landing in the connection of all of us, and knowing that we might be heralding in from different places in the world, but we are certainly all in this together. Trying to make my little screen smaller here on the right. Thank you for the introduction, Dawn, and your persistence in making sure I communicate. I'm so appreciative. I've been on a journey of I'm partially blind, so I'm trying to be less on screens and more on land. But thank you for being patient with getting words and details from me so you can introduce and bring in this time. And part of that is I might trip over technology a little bit, but let's just see how I do. Um, I'm coming in from what was introduced as our Ecovillage, and we are um, in the area of Shawnigan Lake on Vancouver Island in Canada here, on the West Coast, in a place that again is the traditional territories of four nations. We're actually, it's curious that they're what this area was chosen or chose itself to be Maxwell International Baha'i School once upon a time. It's actually what brought our Ecovillage to this location. But the school, um, when the school was there, there was a ceremony with the Indigenous peoples of this area, and the the spiritual gathering that happened actually called back the first peoples, the Indigenous peoples of this area, back to Shawnigan Lake. And that's kind of significant because the day that ceremony happened was the day we moved on site to our eco village. So here we are as a 25-acre regenerative living learning center. And on the 25 acres, we've managed to, one of the reasons we're called a lawful permaculture is some of the farming and food systems and all the work many people on this call are doing isn't necessarily always able to be done in countries in like in places like North America, where we have land use zoning, where we have legal constraints. And an example of that is, in order to create or recreate or re-village, it's not legal in land use zoning to be a park, protected space, a farm, an agricultural production space, a school, and to have housing. I heard the other example, somebody doing a housing co-op and wanting to at the same time be farming. And we are that and more. And we set a precedent. People come from all over the world actually to look at our legal work. And it's kind of funny because we're actually quite a small nonprofit, but we managed to gain partnerships with government and come to some really great logic in creating new policies and new precedents in order to help make these things legal. So we're a school, we're a farm, we are a residential village, allowed 10 homes of whatever size we wish. And we're a school, we're allowed food services and accommodation services. And in this picture, we're looking at the 0 Mile Eatery, and it seats 150 people in the Eat Your Words classroom. So we like to have a lot of fun with the namings of this, because prior to the pandemic, we were working with 10,000 learner connections per year. And that's a lot of moving parts. And a predominant amount of those learners are youth, children and youth. And so we've been working with a design from the last 7 generations to the next 7 generations since 1999. So here we are, kind of at the crux of completing the first 25 years of our vision and looking forward into the next 25 years. And with all the accomplishments that have happened, some really interesting things, like you're looking at an earthen and straw bale building in this picture, which of course wasn't legal in Canada when we started. We had to partner and become a research center with built environments, wastewater. All of the engineered and permitted systems are actually research focuses, and how are they performing over decades. But now that we've done a lot of that kind of infrastructure and early development work, and in some ways, I guess, proved our case, we have 13 universities involved or that have connections here. And we're now looking towards, what is the bigger impact that a group of people can make working locally to globally? And so a number, maybe in the last 10 years, a number of our stakeholders have come in from what is known as the peacemakers movement. And we know peacemaking and peace work within the Baha'i writings. You'll see it in faith traditions across the world since time began in many ways. In the particular place where we live, we have a peacemaker's a prophecy, and the prophecy speaks of the possibility of all races of humanity coming together, that one day again will be the great law of peace. And for people who reside in the United States and places, they would know the Haudenosaunee prophecies, and the things that actually founded the American Constitution were based in that peacemaking work. And there's some history pieces there that are really interesting and important, but our farm and all of the food systems and food production work that has been happening really started to bring ourselves over to knowing that now people know permaculture and ecovillage movements around the world. People are working on unity and collaboration around the planet. But how can we do that? What is the technical or the scaffolding that we can move through in days of great challenge, in days of so much polarization that is being experienced? I can speak to our community here where friends, families, neighbors, not to mention the bigger national scene and international connections, is fraught with this polarization. And so the term peacemaking is actually also a legal structure. It's a legal structure, it's a social structuring, and it comes with the deeper work of relational accountability, where in many people's eyes, and particularly here where in British Columbia, it's that we've just had a precedent-setting situation where our local nation has been awarded back land in Vancouver that's part of Canada. And we're now looking at what is the territory we're in, and what does it mean for things like in Canada, we have laws that are in restorative justice and the truth and reconciliation process. And we have calls to action that are saying, how are we going to do this peacemaking where we bring land and people and culture and look back in time to right some of our past wrongs and do reparation work, and then even possibly look forward to where we become regenerative. And, all that complexity, because it is layers of complexity. I'm going to bring us to the quote from Abdu'l-Baha, where, whether people are looking at something through a lens of economics or social or an environmental or spiritual, that we have this one quote we can lean into, that the farmer and the land peoples extended, like you can look at all the other classes of our society, but the number one as farmers is greater than all those other classes, many, many times greater. Therefore, it's fitting to see that even economic problems be first solved with the farmer, and the farmer as the first active agent in the body politic. And I think we can look towards this quote and think about that whole ecosystem and understand the farmer as land tending, those who work with the body politic, but as land, as place, as belonging, and as that knowing. And this is where we started to work here at our Ecovillage, the local community. We have a number of Baha'i members in the Cowichan Valley who are Cowichan Nation people. And the Hulkaminam language is Cowichan. Some people know it as the Cowichan Valley, but there is a refocusing now on Indigenous agriculture, knowing that once the land was tended in ways that actually considered things like the large forest fires we're having here. We're under great threat and duress from fires and impacts with the land that we haven't faced before. We're losing forest at unprecedented rate, not only to logging, but actually to forest fires. This year being one of the most recent times, we need to look at how can we consider the forest, to consider the soil, to consider the ecosystem, and farming becomes a large focus in that conversation of solution. And farming and food meeting traditional ecological knowledge, I'm sure isn't just from here, but I can speak from here, where we're working on projects to look at bringing together native plant and medicine species and working with soils and working with fire in a way that melds with farming and food systems that are more modern. And maybe some of those will be actually focused on permaculture or regenerative farming, but also brought together with this knowing of traditional ecological knowledge, or tech as it's called, in the science behind it. And this is traditional ecological knowledge, if I can give my paraphrase for that body of work, actually leans into knowing that the ecosystems had the ability to work symbiotically always. And the design, Mother Nature was the great designer without us. Already the systems were regenerative. So here's a picture of something we planted right in the middle of the farm. And we spent our summer doing this. But we have a Nuchalnith teacher, a plant medicine teacher, Heineke, is a co-teacher, co-farmer. And Heineke has brought together a lot of the community in prayer, asking what can center this work, what can bring together the four races of the humanity, of humanity, with the four directions, with the four elements, and really bring holism and unity. And so the design that we're looking at is the construction of, these are 30-foot wheels in the middle of the farming and food systems. And they're curiously right where the natural ecosystems on the left of the picture, the forest, is meeting the agricultural systems. And we're bringing together both and letting go of this notion of either or. But we had this one potato field where we thought this is what's being asked for. And we worked with the elders here locally. And in fact, Quihal is an elder, a Cowetson elder, who is also part of the Baha'i faith. And we've been working now for 2 years with meetings of all races, all nations coming together in a project called the Four Direction Peoples Unity Gatherings. And this space is being created so those unity gatherings can grow and grow. We're looking at a medicine wheel. This is actually a garden for foods and medicines that will be planted in each of the directions. And there's a second wheel behind it that is called a unity wheel. And that unity wheel is found in hieroglyphics, in cave paintings back in places around the world. It's as old as time is recorded, and no one actually knows the shared significance of it, but we just know it exists. So we replicated that flying wheel in the back one you can't see. And then the front one is the medicine wheel. And each of them are medicine plants, but they hold center on an entire ecosystem of 10 acres of food systems. I'm scared to enlarge this, so I'm just going to work with it like this. Um, the focus that came forward with children and youth, and the Four Direction Peoples Unity gatherings is a project called Future Ancestors. And it's really rooted in all the traditional knowledge and the ways of the past, leaning back 7 generations and knowing that all of that wisdom is carried forward by our generations now, and then leaning forward 7 generations and looking towards the food systems, the farming, all of the technical and science work we do, coming together with the spirit of these future ancestors, the spirit of the children and youth, and the spirit of the community, being able to really work together in full unity to make these transformational moves into the future. And we really focused on being not just international, but internation. And so in Canada, we have many First Nations that also don't historically necessarily work together. So needing to bring together nation to nation First Peoples, but also nation countries in an intercultural, interfaith, international peacemaking process. And to grow food, to be in those ecosystems, it's this profound understanding that we can do what we can do now, but it's really looking towards the future generations and what will come one day, and what are we leaning towards, and bringing together that unity as the foundation to transcend all of the boundaries and have those youth for tomorrow be able to be the innovators and the dreamers and the leaders that will navigate the challenges and opportunities of the future. And that bringing together the Four Direction peoples, those that are called the different races of humanity, into the sacred fifth direction, into the spirit of the center, and that spiritual faith to hold this, brings together, bridges the generations through that kind of shared wisdom. And that learning of peacemaking, of actually having no right, no wrong, no good, no bad, no victim, no perpetrator, but actually to all be affected parties, where peacemaking is a technical aspect of our governance, of our social systems. It's a way of life. It's an understanding and being able to hold that spiritual high positive regard, not just seeing ourselves as farmers and working in the relational accountability with the land and the food systems, but with all beings. And that Future Ancestors project has been worked on with the youth to prioritize restorative practices that are social and human, economic, ecological, and spiritual, and that every seed that's planted moves towards that as an equitable future. And as we look at that design and bringing together curriculum and garden and land and food systems, the peacemaking plays a pivotal role. The youth play a pivotal role. The medicine gardens is actually a place to gather. We're building a 30-foot seating circle where elders and accessibility for people of all backgrounds and ages can come together and sit circle to be able to speak to these needs and have the protocols for and learning of peacemaking as part of our spiritual unity building and the work of restorative justice on a spiritual and faith focus. And again, this is interfaith. So how do we bring together those community partners to understand those ways and doing? And this is a picture from this summer. That's kind of a wide picture the way it's sitting now, but it is our permaculture design course that we've had here for the last 26 years, brings people from all over the world And there's 60 students in a 2-week revillaging camp that we do. It's interfaith, it's intergenerational. We have a children and youth and family camp alongside the permaculture design course. But this year, 30 people made that unity building journey of the 4 direction peoples. And curiously, not specifically by design, but more than 50% of our enrollment was Indigenous peoples from different countries. So the Indigenous peoples of our local community held center in this revillaging camp. And yet the registration brought in people who declared as Indigenous from places in South America, Central America. We had a woman from Kenya. And each person talked about their traditional ecological knowledge and their ways of knowing. This picture, we're building an earthen or cob wall in the garden, and it's actually a whole new installation where we're installing what is looked at as a dragon that is being built on site, but it's weaving through the 25 acres, and it is an art and culture project that's being done. And curiously, the dragon serpent in Shawnigan Lake is part of the creation story of our local Indigenous community, that when the creation of this area began, that there's a teachings that this 2-headed serpent, dragon serpent, was dropped into the lake to teach us. And guess what? The teachings are about unity. The 2 heads are not looking at a polarized or othering, but that the body is all connected. And there's just this curious journey of people coming together. Fascinating that dragons are represented around the world in different cultures, and mostly as protectors and teachers, and bringing something of goodness. And so the dragon has become our peacemaking teacher on site to bring together all these ways of knowing and being. And I want to bring us to, I'll put this in the chat as well, that one of our great partners in this work is Charlene Vasquez, is a beautiful teacher, farmer. She's an Indigenous Ohlone woman from the California area who has farming as medicine as well. And we partner these farms and food systems, people who are peacemakers, building these sanctuaries. And they're really much like, when you look at it, the writings and the way of speaking of Madagascar's, if I'm saying that completely correctly, but looking towards the deep medicine circle, you'll see it's really looking at food and medicine and story, restoring to heal the land and feed the people. So this work isn't just at our Ecovillage. This is the spirit of embodied agriculture. And this one is in the United States. Ours is in Canada. But to see farming as medicine, these medicine wheels, this spiritual focus of the connection to land and decolonizing, getting away from these capitalist systems of what is it to actually work with ourselves. And I had 2 great slides. I wish I could show you if I could find my original slideshow here. But what is it to work with ourselves, who are really the next part of working in the embodied way of peacemaking and returning ourselves back to this unity building with the humans, but all the other realms in the design of how we're moving forward with justice in agriculture. And our Canadian government has been focusing a lot recently on a lot of project work is being asked of us to be anti-oppression, anti-violence, anti-hate, um, all with under truth and reconciliation work. And all the antis that are stacking up are not necessarily that inclusive language of unity building. So we'll take on these projects, but we then mirror back what is the medicine of anti? We want to talk about what we want to create, not what we don't want as much. And so the good medicine of peacemaking is kind of the the healing balm for the anti-oppression work, that we bring together unity work and decolonizing work in this way of being with agriculture that is um, yeah, it's called an innovation center, but it's actually as old as time and in the places of the world. So I will pause there and really just open this, and hopefully our beings are kind of with this still, not just in a way of thinking it through our heads, but feeling it through our ways of belonging, of where we are on this planet right now, our ways of connection, and and what it might mean for us together in this agricultural working group. How do we lean forward into this way of thinking for 7 generations? And so I open it up to questions that we might have based on that. And I really apologize. I lost my last 2 pictures.
Maybe you can find them while we're here.
Yep.
So any thoughts, anyone, any questions or comments?
Well, I'd like to see. Thank you so much for what you're doing, Brandy, and this is so important for humanity. And I mean, everybody in the world needs to come together and just elevate each other. And like you're saying, like you're not competing with other organizations that are doing the same. You're collaborating, and this is where humanity is at. uh like we can grow our own food. I know there's a woman in India that I haven't been able to reach out to yet, Vandana Shiva, but I hear she has this original seeds that have not been transformed by GMOs, and like this is what we need to plant today. And the fact that you're making all this surrounding by the medicine wheel and the native prophecies and well prophecy from around the world, to grow our food, to connect with the elders, the children. That's beautiful. So I want to say a big thank you, and I'd love to have you on our new podcast, by the way.
Yeah, we're also partnering with some projects in Mexico, and I heard you say you're down there. And I
Yeah.
just popped for everybody our contact information in the chat. And so if you want to reach back out, we have something we call the Village to Village projects. And you can reach me on WhatsApp on that phone number, or email our main one. The Village to Village projects are really focused, like we're making a soap with our friend from down the road who is from Ghana, and she is bringing shea butter here from her farms and her women's collective in Ghana. And then we have goat milk and we have medicines on the land. So now we're making medicinal goat milk shea butter soap in the Village to Village project, funding this project and that project potentially. So there's very curious ways to tie these projects together, I think near and far as well.
Well, thank you so much. And I just mentioned in the chat when you were talking, I have a friend who founded the Medicine Wheel Expo and the Medicine Wheel magazine. And so I'd love to connect him to you as well. So I'll send him your information. Thank you so much.
Right. So Brian has his hand up.
Yes, you mentioned very early on something about burning, and I mean we're also focused on climate change and our wildfires, and we hear every now and then in the media about the contributions or potential contributions of Indigenous people who historically have done a better job managing the forests and with that. But I'm just wondering what your sort of practical experience has been with burning in the way that you're doing farming right now on your site.
Well, you probably know that controlled burns were how the camas fields were created, and there's things historically here that managed forests, like this old kind of hypocrisy that First Nations people never farmed, or there's clam farming that's as old as time here. There is marine and land-based farming that brings down through the knowledge, but there is government programs now in Canada that are bringing back the understanding and trying to bring back that traditional ecological knowledge of controlled burns and how to work with the forests. And it's a counterbalance to having wiped out so much of our temperate rainforest here in British Columbia. The statistics talk about what percent we have left, but it is saying what percent we have left from what we've cut, and we're only logging that percent. So the math on things needs to really be inspected, but the current need is to accelerate that traditional ecological knowledge of how to bring back biodiversity in any way, shape, or form that we can. And somebody's question was about working with youth. We're actually linking youth from schools, so they're getting credit for learning these things. We're employing them from grants, so they either have honorariums or literally a wage. So they're learning while they're designing, and it's their role, it's their job. They're being validated for it. And maybe there's this thing like, don't pay people to do something that they should want to do, but these days it's not really just incentivizing, it's giving youth access to other forms of science and projects and programs and education by engaging them in as many ways as possible. And there are things that youth want to do already. And this summer we had 15 paid youth on our team looking at these all of these issues and working with youth and climate change. Eco anxiety is alive and well. There is, that choice point where people fall off and detach from wanting to learn, and that place of engagement and agency. And so that's why the dragon was created by the young people. The dragon is a metaphor for climate crisis and fire, of course, but we are restoring the dragon. And that once upon a time, the dragon was the protector and actually was the teacher in most mythology. And that maybe we need to listen to nature and what it's teaching us. The dragon is like a mythopoetic storytelling for youth. So maybe they're not crunching hard numbers all the time in the science of it, but they're also bringing together the beauty, the art and culture work that youth were hired to do this summer. And they sculpted, they painted, they mosaicked these stories and the learnings, but they were talking about it the whole time with professors of whatever focus and government staff, and all the stakeholders came together, and the youth actually also filmed it somewhat as well, so that not only were they listening and working with the conversation, they then filmed it and paid particular attention to then editing it and rehearing the story. So it's this layers of learning that we can do together in creative ways. And we're both land-based and even tech-based to bring it together. And so we can offer it into wider circles. I think that was a lot, trying to tie together a number of people's questions there.
Yeah. Arthur?
Thank you. I'm fascinated by your work with Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous peoples. A half century ago, I was the environmental advisor to all the Pacific Island countries based in New Caledonia. And in preparing my education materials, I wanted to research indigenous knowledge. And each village in that country had maybe 40 different varieties of their major crop plants, enormous genetic diversity to ensure food security in a wet year or a dry year, if there was one disease or another. So there was, as part of that heritage, not only the knowledge what's in their brains, but there was an enormous knowledge of different varieties, biological varieties. Of course, all of that was destroyed with colonialism. The colonists came in, they destroyed all of the terraced gardens and it moved all the people into reserves and made them work for the colonists and so on. But I've often wondered how much is still survives of those indigenous varieties in other parts of the world. Do people not only have the knowledge, but also some of that genetic diversity that was so important traditionally? It's only recently we have the tools to read the genes and understand it in more detail. So we have the science now we didn't have 50 years ago or more. But it seems to me that's an area that would be worth exploring. Are there other kinds of traditional science, so to speak, to be captured and saved and regenerated to achieve that diversity that we'll need going forward with climate change and all the rest? We need that diversity. So have you had any experience with that dimension of things, or how might that be taken forward? Thank you.
Yeah, I think if I just tease out part of what you said, a lot of the science is still embedded in what is really, I think we're noticing coming forward the most, is that science can't exist without language and culture and land being seen as one. So stinging nettle, a plant here that was considered kind of a weed and it's in the way and it can sting you, is actually a great medicine on the lands and territory. But if you look at the name of the plant in the traditional languages, just on Vancouver Island, I think there's like 32 ways to say stinging nettle. And if you look at the genetics of the plant, there's a different mineral content here where I'm living than 60 miles away. The plant is different slightly, and the name is different slightly. So somehow learning the traditional ecological knowledge, we need to understand that language cannot be lost, that land relationality is inherently connected, and culture is part of that. Science cannot stand alone in biodiversity. We need to have the holism of that in order to, and in that, I think, is where peacemaking comes in, because our human relationality has been based in harm and coloniality in ways that those have been suppressed. And now we're hoping to see that thriving so we can bring back that knowledge. And in fact, on Vancouver Island, the keystone species that are being lost, like we are predicted to lose our cedar trees within a period of time, just on the science of it, as we lose our temperate rainforests and the ecosystems are faltering. And so the indigenous knowledge that is there is really not only vital, but necessary to help rebuild or understand if we can rebuild that kind of ecosystem understanding and support. And if the youth aren't engaged in that, it will be what we leave them as an inheritance. We need us all now, intergenerational, intercultural, interfaith, and internation, to come together for our very future.
Yeah, thank you.
Very quickly on the climate change. At least 20 years ago, I went to a presentation by a couple of foresters, and they'd been looking at the models. We don't know how accurate they will be, but it seemed that this area where we are now will have a climate like San Diego. So we do have to be flexible for the future, that's for sure.
And I think, if you look at the science, there's a Cat 4 storm moving into Jamaica right now, and just really sending them prayers. We're creating new categories for our storms. we've created a new level for drought. We have never ever seen drought like we have on Vancouver Island before through all of history. Well, no written history anyway, known history, but we have to look at climate change adaptation strategies with our food systems. Winnie, I just noticed you have up your hand and I can't see that well, so maybe other people do too.
I didn't know if I'd gotten it up there because it's in a white area. But thank you, Brandy. I am just stunned with what you have done and how wonderfully you integrate spirit and practical together. It's so often people are working on technology and material things that they think will solve, and it can't. And I wondered, Arthur and Christine Muller right now have a climate change course that I would just like to tout for people that want something simple that you can understand easily, and it's online for anyone who wants to access it. And I tried to put it in the chat, Arthur, but I am so inept in this technology. But I think it would be worth it for those that want a simple 10-unit course you can read yourself. You don't have to present it. I'm hoping eventually to get some North Carolinians together with somebody else. I can't do it by myself. I need a partner. But it's an excellent way to augment this indigenous, well, it's a lot of indigenous, based on indigenous knowledge too. But I just wanted to give a little publicity for that because it's such a wonderful way to learn in simple terms.
Can somebody put that in the chat? Does anybody have the link to that could pop it in?
Well, Arthur Dahl, he's the head of the International Environment Forum, along with some other folks. So I think Arthur is doing that. Yes, it's
Thank
right
you,
there
Arthur.
So when you go on that site, you'll see how there's an introduction if you don't want to present it in full. There's an introduction of many ways you can use it.
Thank you for that, Winnie.
Yes.
Well, I noticing the time, I want to raise my hands to each and every one of us. This in the language of the Hulkaminam speaking peoples, we've been taught, we've been asked to actually be at our Ecovillage as kind of bridging conversations. And this was from an elder 20 something years ago, said this is the work of the village, revillaging with peoples to learn to be this way and to raise our hands in gratitude. This means Haichka in the lands of the Tailish people, the Salish people of the Coast Salish here in British Columbia. So Haichka to each and every one of us for being willing to have courageous conversations and think outside of what we think we know into ways of knowing that are probably needing to be guided by our spiritual knowing. And so, yeah, just so much gratitude and just humbly submit to you. Just, that everyone gets together every month and looks to ways and possibilities being in this connection. There's 2 more hands up. Do we have time, Dawn?
Yes, we have plenty of time. We usually go to the half hour. So
okay,
we have another 30 minutes or whatever, 20 minutes. Yeah. Yeah, so go ahead, Janet.
David was first.
If you don't mind me asking, I really appreciate what you've done, and I know 25 years to come to the standard that you're at now. But I have a question on how is governance structured for the facility? Like, how do you coordinate and make decisions? And then, because it sounds like there's a lot of interested parties that want to set direction. So I was just wondering how you go about that. Thank you.
And you know that old saying, if you have 5 farmers together, you have 25 opinions. So then put language in there. And this summer we had 12 countries at the table at any given time living together. So trying to cook and live together and be with land together and be in relationship is wild. But we originally were founded on the principles of consensus. And it was very curious. We had a PhD program come up from California. Fielding University came up with a PhD program, and a number of the students, after we did an immersed learning journey together for a week, they doubled back and said they wanted to do a project on governance and to think about it. And one of the students, she's a Baha'i, asked to look at Baha'i consultation. Another student brought in consensus and looked at our model that we were currently using at the time. We also looked at consent or sociocracy. I think there was holocracy and democracy. There was 5. And the PhD students went on a year-long research project. And it was fascinating to work with them because their governance research fell apart. They couldn't agree on how to agree on the governance research. They ended up presenting separately instead of a whole package. We thought we had this little dream we were going to get these best practices of all the different governance styles brought together in kind of a faith-based perspective through consultation. That was my listening to it. But no, the PhD students in a PhD in sustainability weren't able to necessarily bring the human and social dimension together. Environmentally, ecologically, there was a lot of agreement. Economically, and how to think about the actual economics of it, lots of agreement. But to bring together the human, social, and the governance, you've kind of hit upon probably the key reason why we went to peacemaking, because any structure for governance can be applied by the particular stakeholders in the spirit of your intent. And so if your spirit of your intent is high positive regard and to move past right and wrong and these kind of oppositional decision making yes no's, then we went to sociocracy. And it's consultation, and it's almost the same model. Oh, there goes my cat. Almost the same model that brings together a general circle with specific or activity-based circles. Like we have an education circle, we have an administrative circle, we have a buildings and infrastructure circle, we have a food and farming circle. We actually have a 7-generation circle as well. So the youth have full stakeholdership. That is not what we're doing right now, Kat. Right. But the talking about together, she's coming in. The model of it means that everybody is inclusive. So there's always voice and a mechanism for voice, but you could have 200 people working and you take your pod circles and you have a double bind. So you have somebody from the general circle in that pod circle, and you have somebody from that pod circle in the general circle. And it's not like you vote somebody in a popularity contest like democratic politics could be. This is more focused from honestly like a Baha'i consultation, where you are choosing somebody who can really be representative of food and farming, for example. That group will formulate proposals and projects and proposals. So everything happens through proposal. It's passed to the general circle, but it really is a way to be inclusive, participatory, not leaving anyone specifically behind. And we will often come to the position of it's good enough for now and safe enough to try. it might not be the panacea answer, but in order to move forward and not get stuck and not get polarized on topics, and that to keep our principles before personalities, because we're human. So how can we keep the best outcomes and that spiritual intention for most people, though people have different windows on the conversation? How can we find a good enough for now, safe enough to try to carry the process?
If you don't mind me saying, it sounds like you've done a lot of work to come to this functioning model. And if you ever have an opportunity to present specifically on the subject of governance as has evolved, even though we don't expect perfection, I wouldn't say, because we're an evolving group, what you bring as far as experience can save others a lot of work. Like if we could find what you've done as a jump off point, is, where would, I certainly sit in on that sort of presentation, just as an idea for the future.
I think it would be lovely to take that on, because we used to joke if we stayed in just consulting and looking for consensus around consultation, we would never get to eat dinner. Never mind other bigger things.
That's wonderful. Brandy, that's wonderful. I was wondering, is there someplace, do you have any kind of resource where you could read about that process? Do you have like anything on your website about that, or
our website is just really changing. As we're going into this next 25 years, you'll see a very different look, but you could borrow some of the fundamentals from Sociocracy Now. In the United States, I think Sociocracy, I believe, came out of Holland. But in the United States, it's often called dynamic governance, mostly because I think it sounds like socialism, and there's an aversion in the language. So dynamic governance or sociocracy, look to Sociocracy Now. Ecovillages, larger organizations around the world, I hear now using sociocracy. The co-op movement is looking towards the fundamentals of that. And you can sew it into your legal documents as well. And what we did is, there is a co-op act in Canada, and probably this will be relative to wherever you are in the world, with the effort to look to the legal structures of the government of the day of whatever country we're in, and just enacting from a Baha'i faith perspective. We're not trying to go up against laws, but we are trying to look at best case scenarios and best practices. So we sewed into our incorporation documents consent-based decision-making in sociocracy, but we have a fallback to a majority vote if we reach an impasse and we were to lose the organization, or some significant realm of harm was called, and then your organization or your group or something isn't kind of hijacked by somebody who maybe there is principles before our personalities before principles, or it's not uncommon for nonprofits and co-ops like ours to have somebody take the direction in a mission shift, and it's often because of economic reasons, and so that can maybe help steer a project back to its center core. If you look at how to work with the legal work, you can bring in both and oftentimes and still stay within legal parameters. There's lots of hands up.
Yeah. Janet?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that when we worked in Uganda, there was a pressure on the farmers to grow a specific type of cocoa to get the seeds or to get funding and stuff. But the farmers themselves would tell me they preferred their traditional cocoa varieties for taste and variety. And a lot of this knowledge of the different sorts of seeds that they still have is in the hands of the grandmothers who do a lot of the farming, and they're not literate or anything. So I wish there was some way of recording. I couldn't stay longer than I was there, and I have a little bit of recording, but I wish there was some way of recording more of the wisdom of the grandmothers that are not literate and the saving of the seeds that they do. And this is specifically Uganda, but we also worked in Tanzania and Cameroon. Papua New Guinea is the same everywhere, that the illiterate grandmas are the ones providing for people and keeping their seeds.
Mm.
Hmm.
Jay?
Yes. Yeah, I love what you're saying. I did a little research. I looked at a video this morning that you had made a few years ago,
Hmm.
and it was great. And it talked about what you're talking about now about governance and how you had co-ops and you united the co-ops under one umbrella, kind of, it seemed like. And the idea of networking and even how people can share accountants and bookkeeping and all these services that are so hard. And I've been working on a high agricultural network that would be a supportive network, so individual gardeners would not be out there by themselves, struggling and making mistakes, but they would have a real support network. And so I've got a embryonic Ecovillage in Birmingham, and so a lot of the things that we've had a horticultural business and a flower business and a little bit of a food business, but just to keep it, it's just it's very embryonic, but the way you've got it organized at a higher level, I admire what you're doing, and I think you can help people that are at the embryonic stage that are trying to keep cats in a bag. It's hard to keep everybody organized.
Well,
Thank you.
I think you've hit on something, to have like a collective of cooperative efforts. And even if they're not legal co-ops, just projects coming together. Not everybody needs to hire their own bookkeeper. People could share that. And, we can look to places like Emilia Romagna in Italy that have co-ops of co-ops that go back through generations. And so the dairy farmers do what they do really well. They have the most incredible quality dairy farming. They don't compete. They collect the dairy farmers together to work together. Then the cheese makers, like Emilio Romano has the most incredible cheeses. That is the name of the Romano cheeses, and people know that from around the world. But they are a co-op, and the co-ops cooperate, and so the cheesemakers don't have to keep putting all their effort towards making sure the dairy is good, because the dairy co-ops are doing their part, and then each one of them are collecting together. And I think it's one of the great long-term examples. There's probably many in other continents as well, but it's one I know of that I can speak to well, that we can look at how that local food, land, and farming and community has been held by that kind of structuring of cooperation. And then they are being impacted now by the major big box stores and the commodification of food. So there is a Walmart come into Emilio Romano, and we can't probably block that from happening, but it is a stronghold in the community to hold the ground, literally, by cooperation.
Great.
I'd like to see our clusters cooperate the same way that you're describing the cheese makers and other things.
That's a great example. Thank you for bringing that in.
Yeah. Anneli?
Hello. Good afternoon. I live in Mexico. And that where you explained this part of the intergenerational interfaith work, international, intercultural, it reminded me of an experience that is here based on an indigenous autonomous group in the south part of Mexico, which has been doing a work for land recuperation and for building their autonomy. But now they have this like idea of the common. It's a discourse that is having a big influence in like all the people related to them, academics, like from different organizations, and it's the common. So it really reminded me of what you were explaining of the way you were doing this work. And for example, they have these lands where they work, but they have been working outside of all politician parties. But now with this concept of the common, they invited their friends, neighbors, to work together the land. So that's the concept of the common. Even though they are not part of their organization, they say, okay, we have this land and not everyone has land. And this is part of what we can do to help make like the world more just. So come and we can cultivate the land together and share what we are what we get there. And also they did this encounter in the last summer where many organizations got together and shared their experiences from Mexico and from Europe and from all different parts of the world. And one thing that they would normally conclude is that they were doing all these wonderful works, but the biggest threat is to learn how to live together, how to consult, and how to solve all these tiny differences. At the end, that was like the major threat. So I think that experience you were sharing really is beautiful, and it would be really enriching to have this, to share that experience, because that's something which many organizations are really having a challenge with. So thank you.
Where was that gathering that you just described? Do you know?
This was in Chiapas.
Okay. There was also one in Palenque, and they brought together the 4 races of humanity and all peoples, but they're the indigenous peoples of the world have been part of bringing together the prophecy of the eagle and the condor, which unites North America and South America through Central and Mexico through the hummingbird. So the eagle, the condor, and the hummingbird. And it speaks that these continents will seed indigenous remembering, revillaging, restoring, and restorying that kind of future, so that it can spread back around the world. And I, invite us to look to the writings to see where that was described within the faith for so long already. But there's curiously Chief Phil Lane Jr., who's a Baha'i who travels around the world. Chief Phil was in Palenque at that gathering, and then also at the World Peace Gathering in Ireland that was just held a couple months ago. And every one of these dialogues is just what you just said, and Nellie, is, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but where all of the science ways out is obvious. It's the human and social element that is our greatest tripping hazard right now. And where from governance to trauma informed, like personal and collective healing, where this shifting and call it decolonizing, but understanding how to take out the harm and oppression of our righting past wrongs into our collective future and working with our youth towards that has to be the central element of our time, because the logic of anything else is resting on that, perhaps.
Yeah.
Thank you for that and bringing that in so succinctly.
Yeah, thank you. So we're getting close. We're right on the time here, but we'll just finish. We'll have Bill and then Jan, and then we'll close. Go ahead, Bill. You need to unmute.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to briefly talk about the native. There was a farmer who I heard an interview with on NPR. They were talking to him. He was sent to Tibet to teach the people how to farm. Well, they already knew how to farm. So his interpreter said, please just watch the people and don't criticize. And please just observe for the first month. Don't tell them what to do. So he observed, he went out, and what he saw them gathering up big black rocks and putting them on the snowy field every 10 feet. And he said to the interpreter, he said, why are they doing this? We take the rocks off the field. And the interpreter said, just watch and observe, please. So he did, and he came back a week later, and there was 3 feet of snow gone around each rock. He came back another week later, and there was like 10 feet of snow gone around each rock. And then, a couple of days later, the whole field was clear of snow. They went back out, took the rocks off the field. It was to get rid of the snow so the soil could warm so they could grow the crop earlier. And there's so many different techniques like this that different cultures use, and I think we really need to pay attention. So I just wanted to share that with you. That's all.
Thanks, Bill.
All right.
All right. Jan?
Hi, hello everyone. I'm sorry I came late, so I didn't hear much about what the group was about. But what I read from what Janet said is coming together, healing with the land. I don't have internet where I am, so I had to walk up through the snow because I'm in a rural area to get here. The internet went out. But I am a queen mother in a mining town, agriculture and mining town in Ghana, and we have been experiencing a lot of issues with growing crops and reforestation because of the heavy metals in the ground and what the illegal mining does. The little I've heard, it seems that there's a lot that has been going on through this group, and so many people had experience or have experience with, helping heal the land. And I would love for anybody who is willing to assist me in reforestation and land reclamation in my town. I would appreciate advice and help. And so I'm hoping that I can attend this meeting another time and listen to the entire meeting and see how I can also fit in. Thank you.
Jan, I just popped the contact for our Ecovillage in the chat. And I mentioned, maybe you weren't here yet, but a project Village to Village that we're doing with farmers in Ghana. And a bunch of it is around reforesting and plant medicines that are also phyto remediation is part of that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
And tying that together with what Bill said, it's that first place of observe in permaculture that works on land restoration. And I was just going to close with one quote, but I don't have screen sharing, just to say.
I can.
Is that okay to do still?
Let's see.
Brandy, you and Jan live 10 minutes apart. I'll introduce you.
Oh.
Yeah.
How did that happen that we don't know each other?
I'm picking up her daughter this evening to go to Laura Lee's in Victoria, so don't worry.
Aha.
Brandy, if you want to share screen, go ahead.
Oh, that wasn't the one. Okay, where did the PowerPoint go again? There we go. So I just wanted to close with these two quotes and ask us all to join the circle, the medicine that we, bring from our communities, from our hearts, from the spirit of this work. And locally, to think on this continent called North America, that this quote from the Universal House of Justice, that the groups coming together will bring the spiritual power that releases through the response to the creative world, that we bring together the nations, the peoples, the diversity of the human realm to answer this challenge of the great challenge of human and social. How will we get along and make decisions together and bring the spirit more than the political or the personal? And then also the bigger picture of attaching great importance to the indigenous populations of not just America, but the world. For these souls are likened into the ancient inhabitants of the Arabian Peninsula. But this really speaks to, in this quote, that the indigenous peoples of the world still hold the remnants of the memories, the language, the culture, the land connection, that maybe those of us who are more recently removed from our villages and from land can have within that relationship, that there's no doubt that they will become so illuminated as to enlighten the whole world, from Abdul Baha and the tablets. And again, there is the contact information for here, and I put it in the chat for anybody who wants to follow up on this conversation. And I just really want to thank you for allowing me to come in and humbly submit this work from our community. Haichka.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brandy. If anyone wants to save the chat, you may want to go ahead and do that now if you haven't. If you don't know how to do that, it's at the top of the chat. There are 3 dots. You click on that, you can save the chat there.
Can I please close with that Halkaminen children's prayer?
Sure.
Sli haleni itangak tehila. Sli haleni itangak tehila. Maksokaten maksdeseten. Sli haleni itangak tehila. The meaning is love is alive in our hearts with every drumbeat, with every breath. Love is alive in our hearts. Sli haleni itangak tehila. Sli haleni itangak tehila. Maksakaten maksnasetan. Sli haleni itangak tehila.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have